Hi, in this lecture, we are going to discuss about the Azure Function App Virtual Network Integration. So, we are going to learn how to create a function app using a Bicep, and we will be creating a storage account and VNet, and we will be creating a private endpoint and a DNS zone, and then integrating the function app with the VNet, and then finally, we will validate the solution in the Azure portal. And if you see here, this is the overall architectural representation of what we are going to do here. So we'll be creating a function app, and this function app is going to integrate with a VNet, and then we will be creating a storage account. The storage account will be the public access to the storage account will be restricted, and this storage account is being connected to the function app via a private link. And we'll be creating a private DNS zone as well. So Azure private endpoints are used to connect to a specific Azure resource using a private IP address. This ensures the network traffic remain within the designated virtual network, and access is available only for the specific resource. For that purpose, actually, we'll be creating some private endpoint for the Azure file storage, Azure blob storage, queue storage, and table storage. And then we'll be creating the private DNS zones. So this using this private endpoint to connect the Azure resource means connecting to a private address instead of the public endpoint. So the existing Azure resources are configured to use the existing DNS to connect the public endpoint. So instead of connecting the existing Azure resource like storage account to the public endpoint, we will be using the DNS configurations. Will need to be override to connect the private endpoint. So here is the metrics of the network features. So when you are creating a function app, need to make sure when you want to integrate with the virtual network, you need a plan of premium dedicated or an ASC plan. So you can see here in the inbound IP restriction is can able to do with consumption plan, but whereas the virtual network integration and the hybrid connection and IP address restrictions will not be available using the consumption plan. So if you are planning to integrate your function app with a VNet or an outbound IP restriction, then you need to go and use a premium or above app service plan. So now let's go into the our Bicep template and go and deploy this resource into the Azure. So I am here in the Azure Quick Start template for creating a function app and a storage and a private endpoint. So I'll be providing this link into the description of this video, and let's see what's there in the bicep.main.bicep file. So I'm opening this bicep file on here, and you can see there are a couple of parameters. So it's going to get the function app name, so and the location where you want to create the function app, and the function app work runtime. So basically the default value is set to Node. You can able to select Node, Python, or Java. And the function app plan OS, basically Windows or a Linux. And then there are a couple of other parameters for the storage account name, VNet name, function app subnet name, private endpoint subnet name. So, and the list goes on. So, and we will be creating the resources under the resource tab. So first we will be creating a VNet. So, and we'll be creating a subnet, and we'll be getting the subnet name from the parameter, and the address prefix also will be getting from the parameter which we set in the upper part. And then we'll be creating the couple of private DNS zones, and then we'll be creating the if you see the we'll be creating the private DNS zone for the queue table blob for each storage type. We'll be creating a private DNS zone, and then we will be doing the virtual network link for that private DNS zones, and then we'll be creating the private link for that. So apart from the private DNS zones and private DNS zone group, so we'll be creating some couple of the private endpoint as well for each resource, like for the blob storage, queue storage, table, and all. And then we'll be creating the storage account. You can see here is the storage account which you are going to create. So the type is Microsoft storage and storage account. And if you see the properties of the storage account, so the public network access is being disabled, and allow blob public access is being set to false. So basically this storage account, we can't able to connect the storage account via the public uh, endpoint, so it is routed via the private endpoint. And then finally we will be creating our function app. So here is the function app. We'll be creating the function app plan and the function app. So we'll be setting an elastic premium plan, so that is what it is being supported for the VNet integration. So we'll be creating the function app plan and the function apps. And you can notice a couple of app settings we are setting in the function app. So if you see here, one of the things, all the network need to be routed via the internet. So we'll be setting this website VNet route all is being set to 1 to route all the connection, outbound connection via the private endpoint and with the VNet. And we'll be setting couple of dependency here. So because if you want to integrate this uh, function app with VNet, so the VNet need to be first created, and all this private DNS zone group and private endpoint need to be created first. So we'll be creating this dependency on here. So it will make sure it will first create the VNet and the private endpoints. Once it is the creation has been completed, then it's going to create the function app. And finally, we are doing the VNet integration here. So we'll be integrating the subnet to the function app. So now let's go and deploy this Bicep using the Azure custom template. So for that, I'm just going to here the option called deploy to Azure, and it will take you into the Azure and the Azure Quick Start template. So here you can see what all the parameters which we discuss in the Bicep. So you can see the option to enter all this parameter. So I'm going to create a new resource group for this. So let's name it as RG function app VNet, and let's click on OK. And I'm going to keep all this instance details as default. It's going to create in the Australia Central. That's fine. So, and it's taking the function app name using the resource group unique ID. So I'm fine with that. So the function app runtime and the plan OS and the plan SUK. And you need to make sure this plan SUK need to be the premium one. So I'm taking the Elastic Premium one as the plan here, and the I'm good with this IP address and the subnet name. So the subnet name is the private endpoint, subnet name is subnet function is the subnet name. So, and you can able to go and visualize this template as well, how this is going to create and how it is going to be connect. So if I click on the visualization here, you can see this function app is been created, and then a storage account is been created, and a VNet is been created, and this function app is going to connect to the storage account via a private endpoint. And you can see a couple of private DNS zones are being created for the storage account, for the queue, table, and blob storage as well. So now let's go and create the Bicep template. So now let's go and review and click create this resources. So, and you can see there are around 23 resources are going to create by this function app. So finally, it is going to run a validation. Once the validation has been succeeded, you can able to create. So it's like the validation is been passed now. I'm going to create this resource. All right, so our deployment is been completed now. So now let's go to the resource group and see the resources which has been created. So this is our resource group which we created as part of that. So, and you can see this, the resources are created here. So if you go into the each resources here, so let me close this, so we'll be getting more space to see the resource. So you can see an application insight, an app service plan, and couple of private link for the storage account. And you can see the virtual network is been created here, and this virtual network have a subnet, and we can see there are two subnet here, the subnet function and the subnet PE, and it is being delegated to the Azure web server frame. And you can see this private endpoints. So you can see this private endpoint is connected to the subnet PE, and you can see the private endpoint is being created for the blob, cube, table, and file. And if I go to the resource group and if I go to the storage account, let's sort it by the type. So you can see this is a storage account here. And if I go to the storage account and the networking of the storage account, you can see this public access is being disabled. So if your function app can't able to access this storage account using the public endpoints, it's need to be routed to the private endpoint connection. And you can see all these private endpoints are being added to the storage account here. Now let's go to our function app. So if I go to the function app, and in the function app, if I go to the networking, and you can see the outbound traffic, the VNet integration is being set to on, right? So that the outbound traffic is being routed to the VNet, and you can see the list of outbound IP address as well. And if I go to the configuration, so if you want to route all this function app outbound connection to the VNet, so you need to configure a couple of things in the configuration as well, in the app settings configuration of the function apps. And if you can see here, the VNet route is been set to on, and there is the connection string for the storage account as well. It's been set it over here. So that's all about this tutorial. So hope you enjoy watching this tutorial. In the upcoming session, we'll be discussing more about the Bicep and other functionality into the Azure. So thanks for